Hey, Brian Genda coming to you live from my room. Well, not live in the technical sense because I'm not broadcasting to anyone, but it is live to me because I am experiencing this live in this present moment. And that's all we really have is this present moment. Brought to you in part by our sponsor, the universe, God, consciousness, whatever you want to call that mysterious source of experience of the world around us. Brought to you by whatever that mysterious force is that causes things to exist at all for us to experience. And you can only do that through your own consciousness and awareness of this present moment. And if you can just appreciate what's around you, what's there, even if it's the most mundane thing ever, you can you can do that. And G.K. Chesterton said something about how to do that, how to appreciate the boring, mundane things around you. And he said, imagine you were washed up on a desert island and you just had one item with you. One item from your room. And I think the example he used was a wood-burning stove. Because, at his time, a wood-burning stove was just a normal, everyday object that, everybody had. And, it was the most mundane thing ever, like a refrigerator or a radiator or a desk or a shelf or something like that. Maybe it wasn't a wood-burning stove, maybe it was something else, but we'll just say that's what it was. Doesn't matter. Pick an item. Pick this cup. Pick this Crest Scope Breath Mist. Flavor long-lasting mint. If that's all you had, you would really, really appreciate it. Because you aren't distracted by all those other things around you. You would be forced to focus on just one thing and think, wow, this is really cool, this is great that I have this. Corrie ten Boom, in, I forget her book, but her autobiography, she talks about being in prison. And I think she had two things to do. One was, I forget what it was, but we'll just say knitting, for example. They let her knit for some reason, to give her something to do. The other was a single ant that would come in and out of her cell through a crack in the wall and eat the crumbs of her leftover food. And she would, when that ant wasn't there, she would knit to pass the time. But whenever that ant came along, she would stop knitting. And she would get down on the floor and just watch, enthralled, fascinated by this little ant. The way its legs move, the way it, moves in a straight line, the way it carries her crumbs. And because those were the only things she had to do, she would never do them at the same time. Because she had nothing else to do. So it would be kind of like if all you had to do was you had a TV and you had... like the only thing in your room was a TV, and the only other thing you had in your room was like a window, to look out into the world, you wouldn't try to do both things at once. Because it would be kind of a waste. You want to know that you can sit there and look outside, and then when your TV program comes on, you stop looking outside and you turn on your TV. Because there's so much out there in the world to look at and be interested in. But your brain can't appreciate all those things at once. You don't have a God's eye view of the world. Your consciousness is limited to this little narrow dome right here. Or it is contained or filtered through this localized conscious experience. You can't experience all things at once. And what creative people do, such as artists or musicians, and I would include scientists in this, what these creative people do is they look at the world around them, and then they notice one aspect of it, and they zoom in, and they look at it and they say, wow, that's really interesting. Look at how this works. Look at the composition of this scene. And they take a picture of it, or they paint a picture of it, or if you're a scientist, they set parameters around it and say, okay, this is a tree. What does this tree do? Why does it have the bark it does or the leaves it does? And they view it in a technical sense, but it's still a sense of wonder. And it's the same sense of wonder that the artist experiences, only it's just looking at it from a different angle. And it would be like if just out in your yard, somebody saw a really cool, well, no, not even a really cool, just a boring, normal old sparrow sitting in a tree branch. And they took a picture of it. And by constricting the focus, and framing it so that it has parameters through which to view it, you notice things about it, and you value it, and you appreciate it, and you say, wow, that's really cool. And so if somebody were to take that photograph and show it to you, and you looked at it and you said, wow, that's really cool. I never noticed sparrows like that. I never noticed the way the tree branch has this really cool design. And the fact that you put parameters around it means that you notice it because everything is part of just a single composition. And by seeing it in that single composition, you're seeing how that sparrow doesn't exist just by itself, just as a sparrow or just as a tree branch. They all come together and they form a beautiful image. And it's beautiful because you see how everything is right where it belongs. It's right in its place. And and then after you look at that picture, you look out your window and you see a sparrow in a tree branch. And because somebody showed you how cool it looked by setting those parameters up, you with your own mind, you start setting up those parameters. And you think, wow, that's really cool. What if I took a picture of this? you know. And then what happens is you might notice something else, and you think, wow, that would be a really cool picture. And you keep framing your experience of the world on all these different levels. And then you start to notice how all these different levels are part of the same thing, and they together create a larger picture, a larger composition, a larger whole. And you can keep zooming out and out and out and out and further out. First you see the branch, and then you notice, oh, that's part of a tree. Then you walk further away and you look at that tree as part of a landscape in your yard or in a field or on a hill. Then you notice that landscape is part of a larger landscape because there's mountains in the distance, and above the mountains there's clouds and the sun, and you know, if you were to take a spaceship up, you could keep zooming further and further out until you're just looking at this pale blue dot, and you're thinking, wow, that's so cool, because that pale blue dot is just one small part of a larger whole, which is this galaxy, and this galaxy is part of the universe. And this actually works the opposite way too. You can keep zooming further and further in. You know, you can look at that leaf, and then you can take a magnifying glass to it, notice all the little veins on it, and then you say, oh wow, that's really cool. I didn't know that these veins on the leaf were part of the leaf. And then you take a microscope out and you say, I want to see how much more connection there is on a microscopic level. And you can see little critters running around on it, and you can see how the veins are carrying nutrients around. And you can keep zooming further and further into the chemical level, or the atomic level, or the subatomic level. And then you're looking at it from an atomic level, and you're thinking, now you're talking physics. And you're like, well, why does this leaf? How do these atoms interact with the larger world? How are they affected by gravity? How are they affected by the other atoms in that leaf? And you're seeing these little snippets as part of a larger whole. And that's exactly what's going on with the localized consciousness within your own tiny little snippet of the world. That larger consciousness focused and zoomed in, and restricted into a brain, into a physical body, your individual human experience. And when all these things go through your head, all these ideas, they're always out there, but when the thought comes in, it's like that concept that exists as part of a larger whole kind of meanders its way into this restricted experience of the world. And it's like framing. It's like framing something out there within, parameters, within a frame, within the edges of that picture. And if you can look at things like that, and by narrowing it down into one little item, one little thing that you can value, by being mindful of it, you start viewing everything that way, and the picture becomes larger and larger and larger. And the fact that your consciousness is restricted, and it has to exist within certain parameters with it, with certain boundaries, with certain edges, it's not a bad thing. It's a starting point. And that becomes a bad thing when you don't keep on advancing and enlarging that picture of the world. You just keep it that way. You say, this little experience that I'm having, this is all there is. That's it. This is my picture of the world, and that is the way the world works. It's the way the world is. However, if you recognize, oh, this isn't the world, this isn't the entire world, this is just a picture, this is one little snapshot of the world, this conscious experience, this room is not all that exists. Doesn't make it any less valuable, the fact that it's got walls. There's stuff outside, but you look around the room and you think, wow, this is a cool room, and that's a cool picture, painting on the wall. And you value that. Then once you walk out of this room into another room, you value that room in the same way. And then you step outside your front door and you look around at nature and you see that as just one larger room. And you keep on viewing everything from a larger and larger perspective. So that restriction of experience is your starting point. That's what you were given. Because if you were to experience everything, the world in all of its terrible beauty, you would not be able to handle it. It would be like expecting a small child to climb a mountain. It just would not physically be able to do it. And if you made that child climb that mountain, it would fall apart. It would say, I can't do this. I want to go home. I just want, to go home, eat some cookies and go to bed, and that's all I want. And that's because that's the level that the kid is at in his ability to traverse the world. However, you don't want to stay at that level. You want to grow. And you want to grow from a small child into an adult. And you want to be able to start walking further and further distances and become stronger and stronger until eventually you can climb that mountain. But you don't start by trying to climb the mountain. You start by exercising. You start by, you learn to crawl, then you learn to walk, and then you learn to run. Or swim, or jump, whatever it is. And so you start with reality as it is in your narrow viewpoint, and then you expand it. So I've already said that. So yeah, that's a way of looking at the world, and a way of being mindful of the world around you. And yeah.